The fire of competition plays that role as well. I mean, you look at people who compete. Let's talk about martial artists. So I own a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu school with Marcelo Garcia. We've discussed Marcelo a lot.
Definitely. And you, just as mentioned, creating chaos and training yourself to operate optimally in chaos compared to others. And of course, Marcelo, who's what, 9-time?
9-time
world champion, is the master of the scramble.
Yeah, they call him the king of the scramble.
The king of the scramble.
I mean, he's the greatest transitional player in the history of sport, maybe. He's incredible. I mean, the essence of his game is to not hold, to allow people to move, and to again embrace the chaos and get there first. He just has cultivated the transition so systematically that he has 10 frames in transition, where somebody else will just be moving from one position to the next. But that transition itself is something which is like, that's his ocean. It's a beautiful thing to see. But if you look at the school, Marcelo runs the school so beautifully. And we've got, at this point, a lot of world-class competitors. A lot of the school tends to win pretty much all the tournaments. A lot of the guys who you've trained with.
Not the
Well, if you look at the learning curve of the people in the school, the ones who put themselves on the line as a way of life just learn much faster than the ones who are protecting their egos, right? Most schools, what happens is someone gets good, and then they have to win to protect their status as being very good or dominant. Usually happens with martial arts instructors, which is that they reach a certain level, they open a school, they get a little bit older, they get a little fatter, they have a reputation, so they stop training because they don't want to be exposed by the young students who are coming up, and they, sit in the sideline, but their egos get increasingly large, but riddled with insecurity, and this brittleness tends to then splay down to the students, and the whole school becomes a joke, right? Versus, Marcelo, the way Marcelo runs our school is so magnificent. Everyone's on the mat training so hard as a way of life. Everyone's on a world-class growth curve. And it's very interesting to observe who the top competitors pick out when they're 5 rounds into the sparring sessions and they're completely gassed. The ones who are in the steepest growth curve look for the hardest guy there, the one who will beat him up, or who might beat him up. While others will look for someone who they can take a break on, right? And so there's that constant search for exposure. And that's kind of a parallel to what you're describing in terms of not having an ego to protect. You said not having
a
reputation to protect,
or a fixed identity to protect.
Right. So this is a way as a competitor to constantly put yourself into the fire.
Do the guys? So is it correlation or causation? Meaning, are the guys who on round 5 pick the hardest guy in the room, have they already self-selected by coming to this school, in a sense, or did they start off perhaps when they walked in the door, the guy who would pick the easiest person in the room at round 5, and have been converted into the guy who will pick the hardest person?
You see both.
You see both.
You see both.
In the latter case, how do they cultivate that transition?
I think that Marcelo is a great role model.
I think it's a fantastic metaphor for life, right? I mean, you need this everywhere.
100%. I mean, I think that, we think about this principle of cultivating quality as a way of life, and the big things and the little things. And you look at the way Marcelo runs that training environment is pretty exceptional. I mean, if people don't have,
he puts his ass on the line all the time.
His ass is on the line all the time, and he's getting a little bit older. He has 2 kids, and he's a wonderful dad. His life is not just 100% jiu-jitsu anymore. He has all of these, young 20s, at this point, world-class students who want to go at it hard with him, and he goes at it hard with them. He wants to. He doesn't mind getting exposed. He brings it. He's living it, but he's also creating an environment where people are present to quality in little things. If someone doesn't have their gi on straight, if they haven't tied their belt, if they're sitting in a way that's sloppy,
what happens?
He tells them to straighten their gi.
I love that.
When people are running, are doing the warm-up, if they're cutting the corner a little bit, he tells them to run the full circle. If people are doing a certain drill in a sloppy way, he refines it. So it's the little things, right? And as you watch Marcelo doing the warm-up, there's a way that he'll have his hand and just brush against the mat as he passes it. Like you can feel him engaging his tactile feeling for the room, right? He's someone who embodies and teaches quality's way of life. So if you're in your 4th or 5th round and you are looking for a way out, you feel that you're fundamentally violating this principle which you've been cultivating.
Tenet of the school.
Right. And this is so important. We think about a core part of how I train people is around the interplay of themes or principles and habits, right? The habits are what we can actually train at. The principle is what we're trying to embody. And so we'll train at 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 habits, which are the embodiment of a core principle. But the idea is to burn the principle into the hundreds of manifestations of that principle become our way of life, right? And so in this case, we're talking about Marcelo talking about or embodying the principle of quality in all these little ways. These little ways you could say don't matter, but they add up to matter hugely.
Oh, I think the little things are the big things,
Yeah.
right? Because they're a reflection. I mean, this might sound cliched, but it's like how you do anything is how you do everything, right? And
It's such a beautiful and critical principle. And we don't, most people think they can wait around for the big moments to turn it on. But if you don't cultivate turning it on as a way of life in the little moments, there's hundreds of times more little moments than big, then there's no chance in the big moments.